do please be seated. Well, here we are on Mothering Sunday, and I think the question has to be asked, is this an anachronism? Particularly after the events that we've seen and heard in the media from last night on Clapham Common. We may be feeling that the image of Mothering Sunday and what it says about the role of women is simply outdated at best, or maybe destructive in many ways. Many criticisms can be made of this day, that it is very painful to those who have had a bad experience of mothering, or have wished to be a mother and have been unable to do so, or have not been able to be a mother, or that it glorifies a kind of image of the unpaid cook and cleaner who gets a reward once a year with breakfast in bed today. Lots of criticisms that can be made about how today can be seen, but I believe that that is because we've, and in a sense the church has colluded in this, we've allowed it to be seen as that slightly quaint Mother's Day, which predominantly the cards now call it, although Natsons are quite good, they've got quite a few Mothering Sunday ones, I noticed. Whereas I hope you've noticed in the readings that we've had today a very different approach. Yes, it's about a celebration of mothering and mothers, but it's also about a celebration of, in both the Old Testament and the New Testament reading, brave and courageous women. And in the Gospel reading, Jesus symbolizing the new family that he invites all of us to. So I think we can reclaim Mothering Sunday and see Mothering Sunday as a time in which we can address some of the very serious issues that we are at the moment in our contemporary society struggling with. So let's go to the reading from Exodus and the account there, and we have these three women here who, as I said, act assertively and in a way subversively, you might say. You have Moses' own mother, and she's acting in the way she is because in the previous verse of the last chapter, Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, has said all of the male Hebrew children are going to be killed. None of them must survive. So she is protecting her child, and she protects her child as long as she can, and then in an act of desperation, almost beyond hope, she places Moses in this bitumen reed basket onto the river. Then we have the daughter of Pharaoh, an unlikely person to see this child. She must know of the edict that has been given out about the Hebrew children, and yet she calls to her attendants to protect the child. And then we have Moses' own sister acting very creatively to say, oh, can I help? Maybe I can help you here. And finding Moses' own mother to act as it were, surrogate mother as well for Moses. So it's a wonderfully rich story about how to act in the true spirit of mothering. They are all mothering Moses, but only one of them actually is Moses' mother, interestingly. Then we come to the Gospel reading, and we have here, the grammar is a little bit confusing when you go back to the reading, but it's 3 or 4 women who are mentioned here. So let's say 4 women and 1 man. And here they are at the foot of the cross. And although some people will say, oh, well, women were of such little account at that time that they could safely make their way, that's why they're there and the men aren't there, I don't think I really buy that. I think in any time of oppression where people are being executed and violence is rife, to come to a place of violence like they did was clearly an act of bravery and a dangerous thing to be doing. So there they are. We have, in a rather kind of Monty Python kind of way, 4 Marys. It's always a bit of a nightmare when you preach on these things. You think, which Mary am I on now? Anyway, here goes. So we have Mary, the mother of Jesus. And goodness me, so Mary, who was told when she brought with Joseph the baby Jesus to the temple that, she was told by Simeon that a sword will pierce your own heart too. Goodness me, the sword is piercing her own heart at this moment. And this is the son who, when she seeks to beckon him outside one of his gatherings earlier in the gospel reading, says, "Who is my mother? Who is my brother? Who is my sister?" I wonder how that felt. Another side of mothering. Then we have Mary, who is the sister of Mary, the mother of Jesus, who's thought to be named Salome, and she was the mother of James and John, the John who's in this reading today, so his aunt. And she's the one, you may recall in the gospel reading, who said, "When you come into your kingdom, she wanted the right-hand side and the left-hand side of Jesus to be for James and John. And Jesus rebukes her pretty harshly at that moment earlier in the gospel reading. Yet, here she is, faithfully at the foot of the cross. We have Mary, the wife of Clopas, who is thought to have been the brother of Joseph. Complex family tree, this, isn't it? It's like a wedding, this. Who's who? Mary, the wife of Clopas. She is there. And then finally we have Mary Magdalene, who may be a more familiar character, who had been saved from the disorder, her mental and spiritual disorder, by a releasing by Jesus, who follows Jesus faithfully, and of course after the crucifixion is the first witness to the resurrection. So we have these 4 amazing Marys there, and they gather with John at the foot of the cross. And that's a powerful image, isn't it? Because there they are at the foot of the cross, but they cannot do anything for Jesus practically. They can't even, almost certainly they probably can't touch him. And that must remind you of the plight of so many in this past year who have been unable to be alongside a loved one who is suffering and who may be dying. They are in exactly that same position. It's an apt image for us to dwell on for the experience of so many this past year. So we have courageous women in the Old Testament story and in the New Testament story. And then in the Gospel reading, we have this amazing act of Jesus. I'm just going to read from one of the old commentators here, William Barclay, who writes about this action when he says to Mary, "This is your son," and to John, "This is your mother." He says there is something infinitely moving in the fact that Jesus, in the agony of the cross, when the salvation of the world hung in the balance, thought of the loneliness of his mother in the days ahead. He never forgot the duties that lay to his hand. He was Mary's eldest son, and even in the moment of his cosmic battle, he did not forget the simple things that lay near home. To the end of the day, even on the cross, Jesus was thinking more of the sorrows of others than of his own. It's a wonderfully touching moment. And it symbolises this new home, this new family. Mary is symbolised as the mother of us all, the mother church. That's why on Mothering Sunday, traditionally, people would come back to their mother church. In Victorian times and days of domestic service, it was a day when domestic servants were released back to go back to their home, to be able to be back at their mother church. And then John, who symbolises for us discipleship, the response to Jesus' call. He responds to what Jesus says to him. So Mary and John, these 2 figures, they symbolise the new family to which We are all invited by Christ. And so that's why we should be able to dwell on Mothering Sunday as a time in which we can reclaim this richer understanding of what it means to mother and what it means to be a human family together. That is why Jesus said those rather seemingly harsh words to Mary, "Where is my mother?" Because he was saying, here is my mother, here is my brother, here is my sister. He treated all who came to him as part of his family. He didn't divide and exclude. He included. It's why St. Paul writes about there being no slave or free, no male or female, no Jew or Greek, but that all are one in Christ. And in a time which is so riven by racial and gender identity, these cultural wars that we're facing, that are so damaging, some of the so destructive views that people hold that lead to the violence that led to the terrible death of Sarah Everard, the objectification of human beings as commodities. This is all stood against by what Jesus says, that we are all invited to his one family. Mary invited into John's home. John, Mary to be his new mother. So let's celebrate that on this Mothering Sunday. Let's celebrate these brave and wonderful women in the story about Moses, in the story of those who were there at the foot of the cross. Let us celebrate them. Let us celebrate all who have been mothers or have mothered us. Let us stand alongside those at the foot of the cross who face today in suffering and in pain, but with the hope, the new hope of the one family in Christ, to which you and me and all people